Thank you so much, Giridharji. And thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me. Namaskar to all, firstly. It is a great privilege and honor to be here amongst you all, uh, especially because we are all fellow nationalists. And I would love that every Indian be a born nationalist. Unfortunately, these days that isn't the case. But I'm sure the work of you all that you have been doing for years together since almost last 3 decades and in several other parts of India will also yield results. Uh, the topic that has been given to me is about Jammu and Kashmir, is about the coronavirus, but particularly it is about the role of the media and the narrative that has been unfortunately set against the country in both these issues as well. I'll give you a brief introduction about myself, which will make you understand who I am, where I come from, what I believe in. And thereafter, perhaps we'll move towards Jammu and Kashmir, finally the role of the media and also the present crisis around coronavirus and how we have some people across the globe who are almost upset that enough people are not dying in India and why this narrative has been set up. We'll talk in detail about that. So, my name is Aditya Raj Kaul. I am a Kashmiri Pandit, as Giridharji mentioned. I hail from a place called Rainawari in Srinagar, Kashmir. My forefathers, of course, lived there for hundreds of years, unfortunately, till 1989-90. I was just about 9 months old when terrorism struck finally in the Kashmir Valley. My father, Dr. Utpal Kaul, was a publisher, is a publisher, in fact. And he owned one of the oldest publication houses in the Kashmir Valley called Utpal Publications. And he was involved with several political activities as well. He was a senior member in the Jammu and Kashmir Sangh as well. And thereafter, what we saw is unfortunately history. You all know what happened. Of course, there were these slogans that happened. Pandits were killed. They were particularly chosen, selected, reputed Kashmiri Pandits, be it a reputed singer or a poet like Sarvanand Kol Premi in Anantnag, a justice of the High Court like Neelkant Ganju, or even the Vice President of the BJP of that time in Jammu and Kashmir, Tikalal Taplu, who were murdered on the streets of Srinagar and in different parts of the valley. So there were around about a few thousand Kashmiri Pandits who were killed, but till date, unfortunately, there hasn't been conviction even in one case, not even a single case where a terrorist, Islamist jihadi, has been convicted. So that's how history has shaped over the years. For 30 years, there have been cases pending. Particularly, you would have heard of this beast of a terrorist called Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate. Can you imagine in the courts of India, for 30 years, cases have been pending against them. And after almost 30 years now, the courts say that we will deliver speedy justice. But now, still, we are waiting for some justice to really happen. And these are not cases of killings of Kashmiri Pandits. These are killings of Indian Air Force personnel and the daughter of the then Home Minister who was kidnapped at that time. So imagine if such cases cannot get justice in 30 years, when will Kashmiri Pandits really get justice? So, as I mentioned, I was only 9 months old when this really tragedy happened. And we moved out to Jammu. We stayed in we were fortunate to not stay in a camp, but it was no better than a camp. We stayed in a garage for 3 months in 1990 in an area called Bakshi Nagar in Jammu. And thereafter, we moved to Delhi. So later in the mid-90s, Doordarshan aired a documentary on my great-grandfather. His name was Pandit Samsar Chand Kaul. He was the first ornithologist of Asia. And he had written several books on Kashmir as well. So some of the prominent ones included Birds of Kashmir, Beautiful Environs of Kashmir as well. And in fact, for you all, I've also just bought this copy of Shankaracharya. And this book particularly has been published in the 50s, 60s. So we have a couple of copies with us. And interestingly, this is published in Mysore. I think it was a printing press of British India, PM Kurveli at the Wesley Press in Mysore. So it's a mini book, that was in those days given to all the tourists who used to come to Kashmir. This was about Shankaracharya. Now we know there has been a systematic campaign over the years to even change the name of Holy Shankaracharya to Takht Suleiman. And this systematic campaign has been on for a very long time. It's not just Shankaracharya, it's also Anantnag, which is now referred to as Islamabad. So we've been doing this campaign. I will come to that as well. So, once this migration really happened, we stayed in Jammu for 9 months. Then we came to Delhi. My father was a publisher, had to start everything from scratch. But in the meantime, he was associated politically. He, in fact, came up with this idea along with his friends of Panun Kashmir. And they started a movement of Panun Kashmir that we want a separate homeland for Kashmiri Pandits, and we cannot live amongst the Islamist jihadis anymore. And that campaign resumed for a very long time. But unfortunately, while he was traveling all across India and giving lectures and making these awareness campaigns, he suffered a hemorrhage. And he had to undergo several operations, but he lost vision of one eye. So he cannot see from one eye due to the stress and what really happened during that exodus. So we started life from scratch back again. My father used to rented a small room in Shakarpur and thereafter in Dilshad Garden in the east of Delhi. And further we moved on and started life from scratch yet again. In the mid-90s, as I mentioned, Doordarshan aired a documentary on my great-grandfather, his ancestral house, and how he was in possession of some ancestral paintings of Swachhand Bhairav of Kashmir. And those 3 paintings were shown on a show called Kashmir File that used to come in the early 90s in Doordarshan. And the same day, some of these Islamist jihadis went to our house in Rainawari, Srinagar, and gutted the entire house. Now, this house was important because it had more than 10 to 15,000 books. It had artifacts. It had, whatnot, collections of last 200 to 300 years, and everything was gutted completely. So this remains one of the major, I get emotional always when I think about this, that maybe we could have requested the army, maybe we could have requested the police to get our, this ancestral house in a couple of trucks back. But unfortunately, at that time, we didn't have that kind of a bandwidth or that kind of a thinking that this would be an exile that would continue for decades and decades. It's been 30 years already. Who knows how long more. In any case, my father continued with his campaign of Panun Kashmir and activities down here. And thereafter, in the year 2006, I started, I just accidentally, I wouldn't say that I started it with some kind of an intention, but accidentally started a campaign. You must have heard of a couple of cases, Jessica Lal and Priyadarshini Mattu, that happened, rape and murder that had taken place. So there was this Jessica Lal campaign on, and Priyadarshini Mattu was also a Kashmiri Pandit. She was a student of Delhi University. So I just came across this case for 10 years. There was no justice. And there had to be something that had to be done. One, that her family met this exile. And then these parents had to suffer this rape and murder of their elder daughter. So I was a 16, 17-year-old at that time, and I really didn't know. And during those days, there was no WhatsApp, Facebook, or Twitter, or social media wasn't very active. So I started the signature campaign. I collected a few thousand signatures somehow online, and some television channels got in touch with me, and we started this campaign for Priyadarshini Mattu. And a case where for 10 years there wasn't any justice. The High Court of New Delhi took cognizance and put that case into daily trial. And finally, within 2 months, the man who was out, the criminal, got death sentence because of the campaign of Kashmiri Pandits. Of course, there were several other Kashmiri Pandits, including Anupam Kher and Ashok Pandit and others who also joined in that campaign. So while we all collectively worked in this case, I thought that, I'm a Kashmiri Pandit, I'm a teenager, and I haven't done anything for my own community. So, and my own generation wasn't even able to speak Kashmiri. I was an odd case. I spoke good Kashmiri, but there weren't, people from my age who understood Kashmiri customs, culture, etc., or even had the same kind of emotional attachment with Kashmir. So we formed this group called Roots in Kashmir. I, along with a few friends in 2006, came up with this idea and started this campaign called Roots in Kashmir. There were multiple functions of Roots in Kashmir. One was that we had to spread awareness, not just across India, but across the globe. Second was that, there was this narrative that was set up. At that time, we realized that for decades together, there was this narrative set up by the radical separatists of Kashmir, including Yasin Malik, Mirwais, Gilani, Shabir Shah, etc., and who got support from people in New Delhi and elsewhere, including those of Arundhati Roy, Sanjay Kak, and all these people who used to support them, create these seminars. At that time, there was Madhu Kishwar as well. But later I remember one of the events of Madhu Kishwar where she invited Yasin Malik, and me and Sushil Pandit, we had a major confrontation with Yasin Malik, and Madhu Kishwar almost threw me out of that event. But, such was our enthusiasm at that time. We, at least 20, 30 or 40 of us, we used to land up at each and every seminar or program of these radical separatists, not indulge in any kind of violence, but just confront them with facts and tell them that you cannot continue with this narrative any longer. We are the victims. We are the original inhabitants of the Kashmir Valley, and we will prevail. So that campaign continued for, many, many years. In fact, we also realized that these cases that were pending against Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate had to be, started yet again. So we campaigned in that regard as well. And finally, we see some hope that maybe in the next 2 years, there could be some justice and Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate could be thrown into gallows. During that time, while they were stone pelting and all these things that were prevalent across the Kashmir Valley, there came 2008 and there was the Amarnath land agitation, if you remember. And I was still an activist back then, and I was just about to join the media. And I started this group called the Amarnath Action Committee in New Delhi, along with some friends. And they were not these ordinary friends. They were people from all strata of society. They were nobodies. They were people who were vice presidents of companies. They were people who were really educated. And I remember an instance where we protested outside the house of Saifuddin Source, who was the water resources minister of that time. And 50 or 60 of us, all very well educated people, some of them on very high positions. We went all there, parked our cars, protested outside, and somehow, I don't know how, the protest turned a little violent. Not exactly violent, but tempers were really running high. And some of the protesters really barged into his residence, and there was a skirmish with the police. And that was the first time that I was arrested. And for the next 24 hours, I was in a prison along with fellow activists, 50 of us. My car was also taken away by the police. And the police commissioner of Delhi at that time said that there was no chance that, we'll let you go, because this is for the first time, perhaps since independence of India, that some protesters have barged into the residence of a union minister and almost broken the house. But such was the tempers, really, because these radical separatists, what they used to do is every year, they used to systematically carve out a campaign, get global funding, get support globally, and put this as an issue of a Hindu India going against Muslim Kashmir, which wasn't the case. The case was very much opposite of the Islamist jihadis backed by Pakistan, really creating a havoc each year, every year with different issues, really. So this happened, and later several other campaigns. We went from university to university all across India. We campaigned all across the globe as well. We held these protests all across. There are some significant days for Kashmiri Pandits that are the 14th September that we mark as Martyrs Day, and the 19th and the 20th of January, which is the Holocaust Day or the Exodus Day. So these are very significant and important. This is apart from the festivals that we celebrate of Shivratri and Navre. So these are, I think, 4 or 5 most significant years for Kashmiri Pandits. And in exile as well, this has remained a custom for each and every Kashmiri Pandits across the globe to mark these days. In fact, just this year in January and Feb, I was in United States for a month. I was invited by the US State Department for an exchange. And I made it a point that everywhere that I went, Washington, D.C., New York, Iowa, Colorado, or Michigan, I met the local Kashmiri Pandits out there. And I was thrilled as to how they still maintain the customs. A very few of them, a handful of them have been staying there for more than 50 years. But still they can speak Kashmiri, still they can have the same customs. And most importantly, whenever there is an Exodus Day or Martyrs Day, they mark that. And we, of course, have got support over the years from across India as well. Coming now to the systematic way how the media has played a very unfortunate role, particularly about Kashmiri Pandits, but overall about the Kashmir issue as well. We know since 1990 that there was no social media, of course, but there wasn't media as aggressive as it is today. There used to be Doordarshan, All India Radio. There used to be few newspapers, including the Times of India and the Indian Express. And of course, there used to be the BBC or some of the foreign press. But they haven't done justice to any kind of reportage as to the ethnic cleansing and the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits that has happened in 1990. There haven't been any campaigns run by them. There haven't been any individual case studies done by them as to why justice was denied. There haven't been any questions raised to the chief minister of that time, Farooq Abdullah. Instead, the local minuscule minority of Kashmiri Muslim radicals started this campaign 30 years ago that it was Jagmohan who was responsible for the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits, which is, if I can put it in the most aggressive terms, bullshit. I mean, this isn't the reality. If Jagmohan wasn't there, wouldn't have been possible for me to join this Zoom conference today, and I would have been killed. Jagmohan was the savior of Kashmiri Pandits in many ways. So over the 30 years, this policy of the Indian media has continued. We know that the most of the Indian media, they may not reveal, but they are of a leftist character. And this has been inbuilt with them for many years. And I remember particularly, I have personal experience because since 2006, when I started Roots in Kashmir, it was very hard to convince the Indian media to even report on our protests, on our campaigns, or any events that we did. We used to almost beg before the bureau chiefs of Times of India and Hindustan Times and Indian Express that, this is an important event, and even if you give a one paragraph coverage, that would be enough for us. But there wasn't any. And this has continued over the years. I would, in fact, narrate an instance without naming the editor. A very popular English channel of India, which has existed for almost more than 20 years now, and a female editor of that channel who is known as so-called Kashmir expert and known for her coverage during the Kargil days as well. She wanted to do a show on Kashmir. And initially when I did Priyadarshini Mattu and Jessica Lal campaigns, she used to invite me regularly on her shows. Once she came to know about my roots in Kashmir, she invited me again. And as is the case, I cannot mince any words, and I took on Kashmiri separatists and I showed them the mirror in her show. Next time she had to organize a similar event in Kashmir where she wanted panelists from all sides, but she wanted a couple of Kashmiri Pandit names as well. So one of the guest coordinators of this female editor came to my residence, especially to invite me for this event to Kashmir. I was happy because I had never gone to Kashmir till that time. And I really wanted to because this would give me an opportunity to go to Kashmir. So this particular gentleman who came to my residence, he requested me to give me names of around 10 to 20 Kashmiri Pandit, popular or speakers who speak well, including like Sushil Pandit, Lalit Ambardar and others who could be good speakers for the show. So I, as very innocently, gave him around 20, 25 names. And that was the last time that I heard from them. Later I realized, in fact, somebody close to that editor called me and said that, in a few days from that meeting, that this editor took all these names because she wanted to ensure that nobody who is in touch with you or from your organization comes to your show. So she has banned you, and she has banned your organization, and she has banned most of the sane who Kashmiri Pandit voices. So you can imagine how systematically the media does what it does in regard to coverage.
Aditya ji, let me intervene here. That is NDTV and Barkadat. Let's have no confusion about it. You may not name it, but I can. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So, I will. I haven't finished this particular story because, Kashmiri Pandit being Kashmiri Pandit and an activist and a future journalist being future journalist, I had to do what I had to. So, incidentally, what happened, there was a very good friend of mine at that time working in her team who separately asked me that, I feel really bad that she's doing this to you. And I want genuine Kashmiri Pandits to do. So can you give me still a couple of names who are not in that list, and I will invite them. So I gave a couple of names, and those names went to Kashmir. And she had a hard time because, of course, they spoke the reality. They took on the Kashmiri separatists, and they did not sing to the tunes. So this, business of half-truths, propaganda, and anti-India narrative has continued for a very long time. We see this prevalent more because social media is more active now. The space has shrunk. But this has been there for decades together. In fact, I'll give you another example of the same editor. When I was, for the first time, I got an opportunity to visit my own home, Kashmir, in 2013. Instantly, I'll tell you all that I might have gone to Kashmir almost 24 times in the last 8 or 9 years, seven odd years, but it's always for work. I have never gone back home with my parents. I have never returned to my home. It's not even as a tourist. So it's always been on a work assignment that I'm going to visit Kashmir. So in 2013, there was for a week-long India-Pakistan encounter at the Keren sector. Keren is in Kupwara in North Kashmir, and it is one of the hot sectors where there's a lot of, unfortunately, bloodshed and fighting that happens between India and Pakistan. And for 3-4 days, I was a vegetarian, and it was a hard time to get food there because I used to go early in the morning at 5 a.m. to Kupwara from Srinagar, return in the dead of the night, and every day I used to repeat this process. And I had a huge team of around 5-6 people with me as well. So for 3-4 days, I used to go there regularly, report. I used to work for Times Now during those days. And on the 4th or the 5th day, I see this particular editor with a huge entourage come in. And the same evening, while I was returning from Kupwara, I saw her reporting, saying that she's reporting from the Keren sector live. And I saw there's a mini road that connects Keren to Kupwara and Kupwara to Srinagar. And I came through that entire stretch, and I didn't see her anywhere. And I checked from the army. And then I checked from somebody in her team that where she was reporting from. And they told me that she's just on the outskirts of Srinagar doing live, but she's saying that she's live from Keren sector. I wrote this on Twitter. I countered her on Twitter, but obviously she had a lot of abuses, etc., for me and my friends who exposed. So this isn't just Kargil, but this has been ongoing for a very long time of this particular editor and overall as well. Coming now to Article 370. Article 370 is something that should have been thrown into the dustbin of history decades ago. When I knew, in fact, this happened on 5th of August, but I think 2 or 3 months before that, I had an idea that it is, somebody in the helm of affairs had invited me for some discussion to advise them on some front. And then later, I, along with some people, was sent to Kashmir to prepare a report as to what's been happening on ground and to advise the government. And I realized that government was working towards it, although I didn't have confidence because no government or no politician had the courage to, in fact, take this step till date. So at that time, I had an inkling that something of this order is going to happen. So I kept on digging a little more about Article 370. In fact, I should have kept it here, but I don't think I'm carrying it right now. Maybe in the next chat or maybe through WhatsApp, I'll send it across. I have another booklet of almost 50 years ago. of former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And he was the first person to bring in a resolution inside the Parliament India for the abrogation of Article 370. And he was the lone person at that time. I think it was, if I'm not wrong, in the mid or the early 60s that this happened. And it is those people who can understand Hindi, and I'm not sure if it has been translated into English as well. It's a 10-page booklet. It talks about, if we don't remove Article 370, how Kashmir will change in the next decades. And exactly what Atal Bihari Vajpayee has mentioned in that 10-page speech inside the Indian Parliament in the early 60s is what happened. He said that Kashmir will go away from you significantly. He said that there will be multiple power centers that will come up. There will be withdraw against your own army and forces if you don't take an iron hand approach in this regard. But at that time, the Home Minister, I don't remember who was the Home Minister at that time, convinced Atal Bihari Vajpayee to take back this resolution in the so-called larger good of India. And unfortunately, that happened. If this would have happened 50 years ago, I'm pretty sure that Jammu and Kashmir would have been in a very different position at this stage. As I mentioned, somebody at the top had invited me 3 months before Article 370 abrogation and asked me about what's been happening in Kashmir. And suddenly he said that, what do you think should happen? There is this special status given to Kashmir, and for decades we have been talking about solution, this and that, healing touch, etc. What do you think should happen? I said, what special status? Are you talking about 370? He said, yeah, 370. I said, 370 should go, ideally. And 370, there's no business of Jammu and Kashmir as a hardcore nationalist, or even if I'm not a nationalist as an Indian, why should I have 370? If a person in Telangana, a person in West Bengal, a person in Kerala does not have a special status, why should a Kashmiri or a person from Jammu have a separate status or a special status? He said, yeah, I understand. I said, why do you ask about 370? He said, no, I'm just generally asking you. He said, but why only 370? Why not 35A as well? I said, Meri Bala say you should do it right away. I mean, I would be the happiest person on earth if you just go away with Article 370 and 35A. So that particular gentleman told me that, I obviously cannot name him, but he was somebody significant in the power structure, in the security establishment. And that particular person told me that, give me 3 months. And I am giving you my word to a Kashmiri Pandit that I will do it in 3 months. And if I don't do it in 3 months, you change my name or you do whatever you want to against me. But I will prove it. And I, inside my heart, said that, this person is joking and, how can this even be possible? But later, after a few months, I think this happened in about April or May, this meeting. And in June, I was contacted by the Home Ministry. And I was requested that if I could make a 3-day visit to Kashmir. And I would be taken to meet different people, including the governor, the chief secretary, other different secretaries, the DGP, the GOC, etc. So I made that meeting along with a few others. And later I met the Home Minister as well. They requested me for some suggestions, which I gave appropriately. And for the first time, I saw that whatever suggestions we gave were acted upon. So this was a pleasant surprise for me that it was finally happening. But there is a greater context to it as well. I will give you a few details. And I have been speaking about it. I went to the Pondicherry Literature Festival. I went to that Mumbai Literature Festival. And I also spoke at the India Foundation event recently on Kashmir, but not in greater detail. But perhaps for the first time, it's important to understand that while it is important to question Pakistan, while it is important to question the radical separatists, and we have been doing that and we will always, it is also important to understand if we ourselves have committed mistakes. If the political establishment over the years has succumbed under pressure of the radical separatists, has succumbed under the pressure of some of the politicians of Kashmir, and given away Kashmir step by step. And here I not only question the political establishment of the Kashmir Valley, the so-called Abdullahs and the Muftis of the world, but I also question the security establishment of India. And this is important. you don't always see a nationalist or a hardcore Indian or somebody who loves the forces question the security establishment. But this is important. This is important because what has happened over the years, and many people don't know, is that radical separatists, while they enjoyed money, moral support, etc., from Pakistan, from Islamabad, they also did that from New Delhi. And this is not done. This policy of engagement that happened for a very long time, I would also name names here. I may not name the editor because I don't want to give her any credibility or publicity, but I will name this particular person in the security establishment because this compromises the sovereignty and national integrity and democratic values and the patriotism of every Indian. This particular person is A.S. Dullat. A.S. Dullat was, in fact, the Raw Chief of India. And before that, he was the Special Director of the Intelligence Bureau. And of course, in the recent years, he has been in news because he wrote a book on Pakistan and Kashmir, etc. 2 books, in fact. One, he wrote on Kashmir, his experiences in Kashmir. And second, he wrote along with his co-author, who was the ISI Chief Durrani. Now, I as a person from Kashmir, hold Durrani and A.S. Dullat responsible for the creation of the Hurriyat Conference in Kashmir. There was no Hurriyat in Kashmir till the early 90s. Between 89 and 93, there was this germination of the concept of Hurriyat. It is of course a larger subject. There was a role of United States as well. There were several meetings that happened in Washington, D.C., etc. But to a great extent, Durrani and A.S. Dullat were responsible for the creation of Hurriyat because they thought that if there is some kind of a power structure of radical separatists there, which is controlled by New Delhi and Pakistan, then there could be some peace and some solution, which was utter crap, and it did not yield any results. Rather, what we saw, terrorism only increasing, radicalism only increasing, and people like Yasin Malik, people like Shabir Shah, people like Naeem Khan, and even people like Sajad Lone, who later converted himself into mainstream politics, used to get money from the Intelligence Bureau. They used to enjoy the patronage of New Delhi over the years. Now, with the abrogation of Article 370, this has been changed. For the first time, there is an understanding in the Kashmir Valley that these games will not work. For the first time, there is fear that the Indian rules and regulations and law of the land is working down on ground, but still not entirely. If you remember, just about when Article 370 was abrogated, Shah Faisal was still out. And Shah Faisal was about to leave the country when he was arrested. And then he has been, of course, in house arrest. There was another lady called Sheila Rashid, who, of course, is very popular on social media for abusing the country, for abusing the government, etc. But I suspected that there's something wrong. They're getting some kind of a patronage. And later, to my horror, I found that both Shah Faisal and Sheila Rashid were getting security from the J&K government, and from some kind of unnamed sources got accommodation as well, particularly Sheila Rashid, who is a nobody. Shah Faisal, I can still say he has been a former bureaucrat, etc. But Sheila Rashid got an accommodation on the Gupka Road in Kashmir. Now, Gupka Road, if people know, is like the Khan Market or the Prithviraj Road of New Delhi, which is the most posh, most popular, most expensive, and only the chief ministers or the industrialists, etc., can own property there. So I exposed yet again that why should a person who's a nobody, who's not even, somebody who does a job, who doesn't even earn money, can get accommodation of this nature in Gupka Road. And later there was some kind of a changes that happened. But the point that I'm trying to make is that while the intentions of the government might be crystal clear, that we have to take radical separatists and these politicians who compromise on the integrity and sovereignty of India with an iron fist, there are still some elements, there are still some progenies of A.S. Dullat who survive on the Indian soil, who continue to sell their souls, who continue to compromise Jammu and Kashmir. all the more. But this is a praiseworthy step for the first time that has been taken by, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. But there shouldn't be compromises. At this moment, what I see is that there is a large population in the Kashmir Valley which is silent right now, who are happy that people like Omar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti have been arrested, put on house arrest, etc. But they cannot speak out. If they speak out, they're killed. If you remember, soon after Article 370 abrogation, there were a few shopkeepers who were killed. Now, these shopkeepers were Kashmiri Muslim. They were not Kashmiri Hindus. They were Kashmiri Muslim and they were killed. Why? Because they said that we are not going to listen to these diktats of terrorists, etc. We are going to open our shops, we are going to survive, and we are going to take you guys head on. And unfortunately, in the middle of the day, gunmen came and shot them point blank range. So there is a large population within the Kashmir Valley as well who need support, who consider themselves as nationalists as well. I'm in touch with several of them who do not get appropriate security, who do not get appropriate hearing several times because of the hiccups of the bureaucratic level or the hiccups at the security establishment level. So as we progress ahead and as we try to revive the politics of Jammu and Kashmir, what we have to keep in mind is that there is a nationalist population that we need to really support. We need to grow this nationalist population. In fact, when I suggested the Home Minister, during that Article 370 abrogation period, I also told them, as Giridharji also has traveled to most of the temples in the Kashmir Valley and some of the very far-flung areas. I said, right now only Shankaracharya or the Kheer Bhavani in Tulmul or the Vaishno Devi in Jammu or a couple of temples here and there are popular. Why don't you create a temple circuit for the Hindu population across India so that they can travel? There is Gangabal, there is, different other areas and far across areas in different districts of the Kashmir Valley, from Shopian to Kupwara to Handwara, where temples are located. You could renovate them and you could create these different temple circuits. And finally, Nirmala Sitharamanji heard, and she finally has suggested these 3 temple circuits apart from a Sufi, circuit as well. But, this is important. If we have to establish and make people understand that this is not the old tactics, this is not the old government, this is not the same way that we survived for the last 30 years, you have to establish this. You have to establish the rule of law, and you have to establish the Hindu identity of the Kashmir Valley yet again as well. So what happened during that Article 370 period, as you all know, from New York Times to Washington Post to BBC to Al Jazeera, everyone attacked the Indian government. And we, some of us, including me, my friend Rahul Pandita, my another friend Aarti Tikku Singh, and a few other journalists who were in Kashmir, who were staying there, who were reporting regularly, we were targeted as mukbirs, almost like, we were agents of the Indian state and we were not journalists who were working there. So this has been the travesty that has happened, that when we report honestly about, traffic moving, there is no curfew at all, we were branded as somebody who is lying blatantly. But we reported what we saw out there. And I remember an instance when I returned from Kashmir and Al Jazeera contacted me, and somehow I thought that, just for the perspective's sake, usually I would have avoided it. But when it came to Kashmir and I saw a lot of propaganda, I said, one must speak to them, and one must speak to them about facts and reality, and even question them and their coverage. So I spoke to Al Jazeera. They came to my house. I gave a detailed interview about how Al Jazeera had reported about the Article 370 abrogation against the government. But they had not reported about how there's not been even a single killing by security forces, how there have been no rioting that has been reported, how there has been no stone pelting in the Kashmir Valley ever since the abrogation of Article 370. And I told them that the only killings that have happened in Kashmir Valley are of that truck driver who was flying with goods and stone pelters killed him. And those traders that came from Punjab, from different parts of the country to get apple from North Kashmir and South Kashmir, and they were killed point blank range by these Pakistan-sponsored terrorists. And not a single report of Al Jazeera mentioned this. So what Al Jazeera did very smartly in their report is that they edited this portion where I was questioning Al Jazeera and where I was questioning how the Pakistan-sponsored terrorism has not been reported by Al Jazeera. And they only kept a small part of it, maybe just a 30-second clip where I was telling them about the reportage. So the only positive factor that I see right now is that with the advent of Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, and different social media platforms, every person is a journalist today. Every person has the right to question. Every person has the same amount of medium space to reach out to everyone. While the world has shrunk, there have been people who have come out and reflected the reality on social media. So what has significantly changed is that while the international press did question us, did run campaigns against us, also we should realize that there's a lot of Islamist money that goes into it. While I was visiting United States, I met a lot of people, not just in Indian embassy, but I also met the officials of United States State Department who confessed that there is this Islamist organization in US that funds a lot of protests against India, that funds a lot of campaigns, and particularly after Article 370, almost millions were spent on these hoardings across United States against the Indian government, and systematically calling this a Hindu campaign against Islam in Jammu and Kashmir. So, but what has significantly changed is that the power of social media is still there. So people from Jammu and Kashmir, people from mainstream, mainland India also came out giving out the reality and questioning the foreign media, which in fact changed a lot of things. I would also hold responsible the Indian government to us, because facts have to be put out. While I praise the Indian government and the Indian bureaucrats and the security establishment for a very absolute brave step that they've taken in the Kashmir Valley, while I praise them for amazing level of coordination with the security forces, ensuring that not a single bullet is fired. But on the messaging front, we were not prepared. While I was I've been in touch with the National Security Council, I've been in touch with the Indian Foreign Ministry, with Home Ministry. Somewhere I felt that there was no coordination between the Home Ministry, the External Affairs Ministry, the National Security Council on Jammu and Kashmir and other issues as well concerning the messaging. I know that while there is a attack from all corners, it gets difficult to really answer them all. It gets difficult to come out. But the reality is that you need to have a strategy in mind. You need to either behave like Trump or China. Either you decide that you ignore it, like Trump does to CNN and other media, or like China does most of the times, not bothering about it. Or you need to come out with facts. There was an instance I remember, there was a major protest that was organized by these radical separatists in Saura of Srinagar, soon after the Article 370 abrogation. And during that time, there were, I think, about 500 or 600 people who might have come to that particular protest. And it was a peaceful protest. There was some aerial firing that was done just to disperse the crowd, and that's about it. Somehow, even though there was no internet, etc., the BBC managed to get that clip on a file to New Delhi. And that BBC clip was aired across. And the Indian government said that, no, nothing of this sort has happened, and this is a blatant lie. A week later, the Indian government said that, no, this is the reality, that the protest did happen and it was peaceful, etc. So there was a lack of trust that happened during that time. So I also suggested that you need to have a messaging strategy. You need to have a communication strategy at that particular time, because this step of Article 370 that was taken was not against anyone. This was to restore the rights, because in reality, if you see, there was so much of discrimination that was happening, which has ended finally. The biggest of all discrimination that would have even led to Supreme Court of India putting this into dustbin was with Dalits and the Dalit and the Valmiki Samaj that mainly stayed in Jammu. So I don't know if many of you know, I'm sure many of you would have read about it. According to Article 370 and 35A, the Valmiki Samaj that came from Punjab mainly about 40 to 50 years back to Jammu and Kashmir and who really worked as municipal workers or sanitation workers. According to the law, 35A and 370, their children, sons and daughters could only apply for municipal worker job, for sanitation worker job and no other government job. Can you imagine in the India of 2019 and 2020, this absurd discriminatory law where the Dalit and the Valmiki Samaj are discriminated upon this way? I mean, they did not get an opportunity to apply for civil services. They did not get an opportunity to work in any other form in other different government organizations, but could only apply for municipal work, etc. I remember because I was in touch with one of the petitioners, Pushpendra Kulshrestha, who was one of the first petitioners against Article 370 through his NGO, We the Citizens in Supreme Court. He said when the judge for the first time read this, he said, "What is this? Is this happening in India?" And you imagine if by any chance, if this would have been happening in any other part of the country and somehow it was ruled by BJP or Prime Minister Modi would have been in the center stage, imagine what the international media would have done. Imagine what NDTV or other organizations would have done at that particular time. So there were no questions asked. I mean, I was astonished that these so-called Kashmir experts in New Delhi didn't even know that this law particularly existed, and there were so many people in hundreds who were being discriminated upon. So this discrimination is, I think, the biggest example of how this is a very just thing that has been done by the government and should have happened long ago. Also, what we have seen similarly is a systematic campaign now. You know about it. That I would give a personal experience because I was in US. I went to US on the 25th of January, and I returned on 25th of Feb. And there were, I think, a couple of cases of coronavirus at that time in United States. My mother was a little worried. My mother told me that you should wear a mask, etc. And I told her, no, nobody is wearing a mask, and I don't need to worry about it. And there were no cases in India. There were hardly any cases in South Asia. And I got back, and there was hardly any checking. Only flights from China, Italy, and Iran were being checked upon on New Delhi airport. But soon after, I realized that India took action. India put strict measures in place, and airports, there was checking happening all across. And in fact, we were the first ones doing a lockdown at an early stage, realizing that this could be, a major task before us. Also because of the population and the clusters that, where population stays, even if there are a couple of cases there, it could spread like wildfire. So it is praiseworthy that the government took steps at an early stage in India. At this moment, I think we have about 28,000 cases in India and about, I think, close to 780 or 790 deaths that have happened. And somehow we see a systematic campaign happening in international media, I think, which has to a certain extent stopped now because a lot of questions have been raised. And there have been some Indian journalists, so-called health experts that have been involved in that as well, who say that, we are not testing enough, Indian government is not testing enough, and Indian government should be held responsible because this could lead to a mass killing. We are also almost voluntarily killing people, etc., etc., etc. But look at what is happening in the United States. There is this international committee there of religions, freedom of religions, who comes out with their annual report and preaching to all across the world, who questioned the local government in Ahmedabad, saying that Hindus and Muslims were being kept separately. Bunkum, I mean, absolutely rubbish. Report came out, and later they did not have the courage to even apologize when their bluff was called upon. And imagine what's been happening in the United States. There are more than almost 9 lakh cases now. There are more than 55,000 people who have died. And there's hardly any, same kind of criticism that's happening. Yes, there is a lot of criticism that happens to Trump because of the majority of the media does not have the same inclination or line of thought as Trump, which is fair enough. But like Indian government has been targeted, how Modi has been targeted, and particularly the country has been targeted, this hasn't been seen anywhere in any part of the globe. And the most astonishing fact, because I mostly cover foreign affairs over the last 12 years of my career, I have focused on foreign affairs, on internal security mainly. I've been seeing over the last 2 months how Indian government has reached out globally without any kind of bias to more than 60 countries. And we plan to, in fact, help more than 100 countries with hydroxychloroquine, with paracetamol, with other medical equipment, with even doctors, with whatever need be. I mean, I remember a special flight was sent to Maldives, a Muslim nation, and in fact, given, doctors, etc., whatever was needed. I remember how UAE and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have been helped. Even USA for that matter, UK, France. We were in fact the ones who even supplied masks to China. The question that I'm pointing out here is that, have you seen across the media anywhere, Indian government being praised globally for this kind of a humanitarian gesture? There were, of course, reports of how Trump almost threatened India that there would be consequences if, the medicine is not provided. But the question here is, India already, before Trump made that speech, had said that we are going to reach out and give these medicines to as many people as possible. And this, even as several Indians are still stranded abroad, there are flights that are cancelled. Our priority, of course, should be and is to save our Indians first. And still we are reaching out to the global community. So instead of setting this kind of a narrative against India, and we've seen this time and again, we saw this before 2014, how everything was done to ensure that Modi should not come to power, and it failed. And similarly, we saw this aggressive campaign. I remember that because I spent more than a month in Varanasi in April and May 2014, when the elections were being held and what all controversies really followed. More than 50 MPs writing to US to ban Narendra Modi, not allowing him to contest elections, etc., etc. Several campaigns held. In fact, he was initially not even allowed to do rallies in Varanasi, I remember. And there was a huge controversy around that. I had interviewed Arun Jaitley in that regard. So these campaigns have, continued, and we should be prepared for more of such campaigns. So interestingly, towards the end, what I would say, we should learn from what Prime Minister has done here. We've seen aggressive attacks on the Prime Minister for more than 15 years now. And Prime Minister is almost immune to it. What he has done is that instead of reaching out to the media always, he has used the power of the social media. He is connected directly with Indians, people who really matter. He has used aggressively social media to reach out to each and every part of the society, to each and every state and union territory every time. And that should be the priority right now. I think we should realize the power of the social media, and that should be, in fact, our focus every time we think of these systematic attacks that happen, these not just in regard to Jammu and Kashmir in Pakistan, or this so-called coronavirus that has engulfed right now. So we have to unite, and we have to use social media appropriately. One important point that I will also raise is that in many ways, I find that when it comes to cohesive action, united action, the Hindu community is not as united always. And I would start this from my own experience as a Kashmiri Pandit. We Kashmiri Pandits have many organizations. And I remember when, okay, this part I should at least reveal, that when I was, when this Article 370 abrogation happened, 2 days before that, I got a call from the National Security Advisor, and he told me that, why don't you drop in on Monday at 11 a.m. So I said, I will come. And I didn't think much about it. During this Saturday, Sunday, this was, I think, 3rd or 4th May. The 2nd May he had called, and 3rd or 4th May this happened. And on the 5th May, this Amit Shah was going to the parliament and everything was being organized, and Article 370 was about to be abrogated.
5th August.
5th August, sorry, 5th August. So thanks for correcting me. So on 5th of August, I went there to the his office here in Delhi, and we saw the entire broadcast of the Lok Sabha, etc., that happened, Raj Sabha, in his office. And finally, he told me that, now you have to return. Kashmiri Pandits have to return. So I said, we will be happy to return. And I got very emotional that day. I held his hand and I said, Wal Sahab, as a Kashmiri Pandit, I thank you. I'm not here as a journalist today. As a Kashmiri Pandit, I thank you for this gesture, because for decades and for perhaps hundreds of years, this would be a historical day and moment for not just Kashmiri Pandits, but all Indians. And he said that, yes, we had to do it and there was no question. So then I told him that, for the first time now I can say that a Brahmin from Uttarakhand and a Brahmin from Kashmir can stay together now in Kashmir, and we can own property out there. So I invite you as well, as a fellow Indian, to come there in Kashmir and stay. But one thing that really touched me there, he said, yeah, I have only one request. Can you tell your Kashmiri Pandit organizations to unite one time because of this entire thing? Because you have the Kashmiri Pandit Samiti, you have All India Kashmiri Samaj, you have Panun Kashmir, you have Kashmir Overseas Association, you have some organization here, they're all doing good work, but they're not united. So I said, sir, I will do whatever I can. But unfortunately, I realized this long back when I formed Roots in Kashmir, and I did whatever I could. I didn't even gain one penny out of it. And soon after, I was accused by many people that you are doing this for your own fame and publicity, this and that. And then I felt really bad and I left. I, in any case, had to leave because I had to formally join journalism, and I started work from Times of India. But it felt very painful. And that day I decided that whatever I'll do as a one-man army. I will do it alone. Even if it is a social media battle, it is a campaign, it is to fund somebody, it is to organize something, or it will be a small group of friends who will come together and do that. So my appeal always is that for the larger good of our community, of India, of Bharatvarsh, we all should unite, we all should come together and focus forward. So I don't know how much I could say in this 1 hour, but I tried to cover each and every aspect. I know that these are 3 different areas actually: Jammu and Kashmir, coronavirus, and media. And we could have hours long of discussion on that and continue our debate. But this much I could share with you all. I would be happy to take any kind of questions, and I hand over now to Giridharji.
Aditya, you really spoke from your heart, and I think you poured your heart out. We could see your emotions, we could see your pains, and we could see your relief. That was really wonderful. We all share your pains and concerns, and you know that for me, Kashmir is almost like a second home for me.
Yeah.
I've seen nook and corner of Kashmir. I've been to Verinag, I've been to Gurez, you name it, I've been there. So I've experienced Kashmir, probably, I don't know. For me, it's also pretty emotional. But keeping the emotional part apart, I'm still concerned that there are these dawlats still around, which is actually worrying me. Because the great work that has been done in diluting Article 370, by the way, Article 370 still exists on the statutes, it's not gone. Um, it has been brought back through the back channel in the first week of April when the domicile ordinance was brought in, when they said you'll need to be here resident for 15 years. So the statement you made that an Uttarakhand Brahmin and a Kashmiri Brahmin can stay is not going to happen anytime soon. Why I'm saying that is I myself had visited all these places and I was very keen to buy property myself.
Which is true, yeah.
I had actually spoken to Farooq Saab, the current advisor to the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was all game for it. You know that. I had taken 10 of our colleagues post Article 370 abrogation. We went there, we toured the whole of the state. Not the state, the valley, I would say. So we were all keen to be part of the change story. But what happened? Why did this happen? That again, you brought it back. 15 years, who's going to stay in a leased property? It's not going to happen. Unless you own it, you're not going to be there permanent. That's not going to happen. So I think somehow strongly, I feel we missed the bus again. We will see this coming back. This will be a relief to those people like Pakistani evacuees and, you know, government employees who've been staying there for some time. All those people, it will be a relief. Agreed. But Kashmir is not a normal state. And you need to give a demographic change big time. And Kashmiri Pandits are not going to go back because the kind of pain, insults they have taken, the kind of insecurity they have is palpable and real. So they know it. We have not experienced it. So we may take a risk and be idiot, stupid enough to go and stay there. So probably, you know, it has to be a collective action that we go change the situation on the ground en masse, you know, a lot of people coming in. That is not going to happen anytime soon. So before Article 370 was diluted also, if you would have gone and seen in 99acres.com or any of these magic bricks or anywhere, properties were still sold in Jammu and Kashmir, right? If you ask them, how did you sell them? They would tell you that, you know, we'll circumvent it. You'll get a 99-year lease plus 99 years or whatever. They used to come with some way of handling it. So that would continue even now. So effectively for the rest of the country, removing or keeping Article 370 doesn't seem to have a major impact.
Absolutely.
So that is my concern. This is where I think we seem to have missed the bus. This needs to be rectified and rectified urgently. I can understand with regard to jobs. Maybe you give priority. For instance, in Telangana, Bangalore, you know, Maharashtra, you always give priority for local jobs to the Marathas or, you know, Telugu people or whatever it is. That is understandable. Even in Uttarakhand, where there are restrictions of Article 371, I could still buy Sawan Ali to build a house and stay. I may not be able to buy large acres of land for doing whatever I want, but at least to own a flat or own a house, something has to be given. If you do not do it, then I don't think we're going to see peace in Kashmir anytime soon. This is my personal feeling.
I agree.
Yeah. And one more thing I wanted to tell the Kashmiri Pandit Samaj, I've been telling everybody, is the reservation that was given to Anglo-Indian community, that there would be nominated Anglo-Indian community representative in assemblies as well as in parliament, has expired in January last. So there are no Anglo-Indians anymore. They are Indians. You know, at the time of independence, probably they were Anglo-Indians. Now they are born of Indians and they are just Indians. So the sunset clause has kicked in and that's got abrogated. But genuinely, Kashmiri Pandits need a representation. You cannot on your own win a single municipal council. Be it Jammu, be it Srinagar, be it anywhere. Literally, Kashmiri Pandits are so scattered that you will not be able to win any election. Forget about MLA or forget about MP. So your voice needs to be heard in the Kashmiri Assembly as well as in the Parliament. So my sincere request is, if not anything, I think all of you should come together to jointly, collectively put a petition to the government requesting for you to be heard in the Parliament. Some representation, some representative to be nominated. Maybe you should ask for both the seats. But in my view, you deserve it, one. And second is Sindhis.
Yeah.
They lost the entire state. At least Kashmir is legally in India, but Sindh is completely lost to Pakistan, and their community is completely gone. Sindhi Hindus also deserve some representation. Both of you need representation. I think you should do that.
Agreed. Let's hope for the best. And one thing that I would point out is that there was a change in trend when the BJP came to power. There was one MLA, Girdhari Lal Rana, Ajay Bharati, who was taken. In fact, he was the, I think, MLC. And there was another person called Surinder Amardar. So two of them were there. Obviously, it was not like a permanent feature, but I'm sure that over a period of time now, the government should think about it. It's an important suggestion that you've done.
I'm saying it should be legalized.
It should be
formalized.
Yes.
That means at least for the next 25 years, Kashmiri Pandits will have a nominated representative.
Yes.
We will review it after 25 years. Something like that should happen.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I'll start opening up for people to ask questions.
Sure.
One small thing is, now I have a lot of appreciation for the Kashmiri Pandit Samaj. Like what you rightly said, you retained your traditions. A lot of people here do not know that the Kashmiri Pandit Samaj is mostly, their practices are centered around Havan. They do a lot of Havan, they do a lot of Yagna Karma. So that is something wholesomely lacking in South India. So I was very impressed with the way that this tradition is still followed in many parts of, I mean, you go there at least to do that and come back, but then it's still happening. So yeah. I encourage all participants here to visit Kashmir. Unless we, the rest of India, visit Kashmir, you cannot take back Kashmir.
Absolutely.
Mere Article 370 abrogation is not going to save you. I request all of you to kindly go to Kashmir.